Hello friends and happy Capesmiths! Today I'm going to be showing you the basics for drafting up a cape of your very own. I do have free printable patterns available on my Ko-fi, but you might have an idea or a design that you want to try out all on your own. Or maybe you want to learn pattern drafting and you're looking for an incredibly forgiving project. It's about as easy as a skirt. This tutorial will be for a more fantasy style cloak or cape, but next Capesmiths, if there's interest for it, I will probably do a more in-depth drafting tutorial that will give you some more wiggle room and help you with more advanced styles. But let's take some measurements. Now for the body of your cape, assuming that you want a full fantasy style cape with a lot of snuggly volume, you're going to want to take what I'm going to refer to as a hug measurement. Now that's a term that I've coined for a measurement that is not considered standard. So basically what you're going to do is you're going to take the end of your measuring tape and you're going to wrap this around the back of your back and all the way to your other hand, and with your elbows braced against the measuring tape, fold in like this. So once you have that measurement, that is going to be how wide you want your cape to be. And then you're going to want to think about hood volume. What I like to do is hold the end of my tape measure at the back of my head, the center back, and then move it away from my head until it's a comfortable distance away. So for me, that'd be about here, because I want to accommodate my hair. And then, this is a little bit abstract, but you're going to take it and measure to about the edge of your peripherals, you know? Like if you measured from your cheekbone about 2 inches out from there, right? And so that measurement is going to be about how wide your hood panel should be as a minimum, right? Now next, you're going to take a measurement from the top of your hair halo, or like where your hair starts to taper off and the little fuzzies hang. Like if you wave your hand like this, you can just barely feel it, right? I'm going to measure from there all the way to my clavicle. Some people measure it more like this, but then like as I'm undulating and moving around, or as my hair were to be styled, it wouldn't provide me with as much wiggle room. You could just take a scalp to clavicle measurement and add an inch, but I prefer to measure the actual hair, because the volume of a person's hair is going to vary. But that length of hood measurement that we just took is going to be how tall your hood is, at the very least in the front. The next measurement we're going to take is the neck circumference. And then we're actually going to add 4 to 5 inches of volume to that so that your cape sits a little bit looser. Now this measurement is going to be the measurement that you gather, dart, or pleat both your hood and the top of your cape to meet. You can also, along the back seam of your hood, taper it inwards a little bit and curve that line so that the hood is the same length at the bottom as your neck measurement that you just took. Let's get on in and do something with those numbers now.
To start with, I'm just going to take my fabric, my ruler, my scissors, and my Frixion pen, and I am going to smooth my fabric out and take my first measurement. This is my hug measurement from before, but it is baby-sized for convenience sake. Next, I'm going to go ahead and get my height measurement, which in my case is about 19th, and that height measurement is going to be the measurement from the top of your shoulder down to about where you want your cape to fall. And of course, don't forget to add your seam allowances and your hem allowances, and be sure that you mark this line and cut straight on the grain. Ironing can help a lot when it comes to cutting out your fabric. Thankfully, this fleece had a very strong grain line that I could just follow with my scissors, but I would strongly recommend ironing, especially if you are not in a time crunch where you have to finish 5 capes in one day. Now this is going to be the main cape body, and next what I'm going to be doing is drafting a hood. So I'm going to fold this in half because I need 2 hoods. And again, this can be done on paper instead of done straight on the fabric, and if you do it on paper, you can use it on multiple different fabrics, and of course use it as you would any other paper pattern. To draft a basic hood, you're going to need the height of your hood and the width of your hood, and I already showed you how I measured those, and I am just creating a cross with those 2 measurements, as you can see here. I've also added seam allowances and hem allowances, which I went over previously. And now I'm going to use that cross shape that I marked out to make a box. Here you see me marking that with my Frixion pen. But see here, the back end of my box, I'm going to want to have a nice curve to it. So I'm just going to hand draw that, but you can always use a French curve or a bowl or something to give you a nice curvy curve instead of freehanding it if you're not comfortable with freehanding something like that. But you definitely want a very nice wide curve that has a gentle slope to it. And then you're gonna go ahead and cut your hood out. And you'll have two of them as opposed to just one of them that you'll then sew together to make a nice hood shape. Next, what I did was draft a little bow shape that I was going to use as a clasp for my baby cape because I didn't want to do ties, and I talk about that in my embellishments video. But next, what I want to show you is how I draft a gore, in case you want to draft a gore for a cape for yourself. I touched on this briefly in my Dino Gore pattern video, but I'm going to touch on it a little bit more in depth now. To start with, let's take our main piece of fabric that is going to be our cape and let's make a gore insert line. Basically, any length of gore insertion line is fine, just remember that it's going to be adding volume wherever you start the line. Also remember that this line is going to be cut and more fabric is going to be inserted here. Now measure that line exactly and transfer that over to the pattern that is going to become your gore pattern. Now transfer that line exactly, but don't use it at that length. You're going to want to add seam allowance to the very top edge, just like that, as well as hem allowance to the bottom, if that hasn't already been accounted for. Next, you're going to make your gore into a triangle. I would keep it under a 45-degree angle because you don't want to cut your gore on the bias necessarily. You want just under the bias so that it's easier to work with and it doesn't wiggle around on you and grow while you're trying to pin or sew it. And as you can see here, the seam allowance sticks over the top just like that. This makes it so that your seam lines come together in a V instead of running over each other and creating an awkward tangle, and it'll strengthen the attachment. I hope that you found this tutorial useful, and if you want to see more from me, go ahead and hit the subscribe button because I do have more planned. If you liked this video, be sure to give it a like so that more awesome people like you can see it, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye, folks!